Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, alhamdulillah, wa sallallahu ala nabi al-Ummi. The author Ibn Ata'ullah Iskandari rahmatullahi alayhi says, أورد عليك الوارد ليخرجك من سجن وجودك إلى فضاء شهودك. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives you reminders or insights to take you from the prison of your own existence, from the prison of your own existence to the horizons of witnessing Him, from your inner jail to the outward experiences. So when a person is praying, if he is stuck in his own ego and his own self, then he's not really free. He can't commit to the worship. But once a person removes his ego and self out of the way and frees himself from himself, then he is in an open horizon of witnessing the power of worship. Witnessing the power and the horizon of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's worship. So the author here is explaining a very deep concept. He's trying to explain that either you're caught up with yourself or you're free from yourself and you're caught up in a worship. And when I say caught up, I mean like fully engrossed. So you're either engrossed within your experiences, or you're freeing yourself from yourself and you're fully engrossed in the worship, where there's such a high level of engrossment that you're almost forgetting your personal benefits, your personal inclinations, what's better for your own existence. You're kind of going beyond that. Like there's an ayat in the Quran explaining the Sahaba radiallahu anhum in their lives, that they were so selfless, there's a word for that in English, self-effacement. They had cleaned themselves so much that at times you forget your own human needs because you're focused on another human. So the Quran mentions يُؤْثِرُونَ أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم يُؤْثِرُونَ على أنفسهم وَلَوْ كَانَ بِهِمْ خَصَاصَةٌ. They're able to give preference to other people even though they are in extreme need. So sometimes a Sahabi, he would give food away at a time when he himself is starving, but still have this complete ability to just give food away to another poor person. It almost doesn't make sense humanly speaking, because we know food is survival. Food is survival. Without food, your body goes through exhaustion and then it's quite hard to move on. So this is where you know the person is going through extreme like engrossment in the worship, where the worship is taking over the person's personal preferences, like anything personal, it just takes you out of that selfishness. So you might see somebody worshiping in the middle of the sun, like sitting in the sun, but he's not focused. He's just like so lost in thoughts, like Subhanallah, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. And let's just say initially when he sat under the tree, he was in the shade, but then within 2 hours the shade is gone. The sun has moved. The shade is fully on him, but he wouldn't know. He's just like, he's gone, he's not there. And he's worshipping until he can't see that he's almost harming himself. But he's not there. He's too focused on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's where Sahaba radiallahu anhum, sometimes they would get injured in salat, but they wouldn't know it. And it doesn't mean we have to reach that level. Let's make that very, very clear. These are extreme levels of spirituality. To be a common Muslim, to be a successful Muslim, just pray your salat, you're fine. Just don't miss your salat. But extraordinary worship, subhanAllah, when you start reading the stories, you'll be like, oh no, my salat is never, ever, ever in that world. Why does my salat would even count? It shouldn't even count. But based on the rules of salat and fiqh, as long as you pray everything properly, your salat will count. Like outwardly, you made your wudu, you're facing the qibla, the floor is clean, your clothes are clean, you pray the Fatiha and the surah and so on and on and on, so you follow the rules. But spiritually and mentally, you weren't the same level as the stories that we read of the Sahaba. Like one Sahabi, he was supposed to be protecting a group of the Sahaba who were sleeping. So he was a security guard. But then he started reading Salat. And then an enemy goes by, and he sees somebody standing there between the trees or whatever. So he's like, is that a tree or is that a human on guard? I can't tell. So he takes an arrow and shoots the person. And the Sahabi is praying Salat, and I think he's reading Surah Kahf, the one that we're supposed to read on Fridays. So the Sahabi says, I was praying and then I felt the arrow, so I just pulled it out and put it away and I kept praying. Then I got shot again and again and then he goes, I didn't want to cut my Salat short because I was enjoying Surah Kahf. But I felt scared that if I die in Salat, the Sahaba will not be protected anymore. So for their protection, he's already shot 3 times, but he's like, their protection made me break my Salat. So isn't that so strange? Because he's forgetting his own safety. So this is what he's talking about. Like once you step out of yourself, brother, can you read quietly, please? Brother, read quietly, please. No, you don't have to get up. So you don't have to get up. I'm forgetting his name. Was it Ahmad? Yeah. Ahmad, can you read quietly, please? We're trying to record the lecture, please.
I'm sorry.
No problem. Please read quietly so I can read. Thank you, brother. So that's one example of a Sahabi who's worshipping, but he's deeply engrossed in a worship. Then there's other stories of Sahaba, they'll be worshipping and they'll be so lost in their worship. Like one of the stories, I think it mentions a child was sleeping. A snake came out and got really close to the child. And there was loud noises in the house, the baby was saved and everything, and the Sahabi praying Salat. Then afterward he's like, then his wife asked him, did you hear anything? He's like, no. He's like, there was a big chaos in the house. There was a snake in the house. There was a baby nearby. What was wrong with you? He's like, I don't know. I was just focused. I didn't hear anything. Then another Sahabi, he had a story where he would tell people, if you have any secrets, you can talk about it now because I'm about to start my Salat, so I can hear you. But if I finish, like I can hear you. If I'm praying, like I won't be able to hear you. And a fourth story I'm remembering is a certain house had a fire in it. Like a fire started. And the Sahabi is praying and praying and praying, and afterwards there was a chaos. They turned off the fire and everything, and then I asked him, like, what are you doing? He's like, I was praying. They're like, you didn't hear anything? He's like, no, I wasn't able to focus on you people because the fire of the hereafter distracted me from the fire of this world. So I just couldn't come back to this senses. I was just gone. So,
is that encouraged in
good question, man.
Because one of the thing I heard that we are told to open our eyes when we are praying so
Yes.
that we can see what's happening rather than closing our eyes and just go into the another world.
No, wait, let me stop you. Your question was amazing, but what you explained afterwards, that's not true. We don't open our eyes to be able to see the world. We only open our eyes because Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam used to leave his eyes open.
Okay.
And not to be alert. In fact, I remember listening to Mufti Muhammad ibn Adam al-Kawthari from UK. He was saying that according to all the 4 madhahib, you're allowed to close your eyes and pray for concentration.
I see.
So to concentrate more, as a beginner, you are allowed to close your eyes.
I see.
But once you become good at it, then you should try to keep your eyes open and follow the sunnah. So like I feel like I'm a beginner, so many times I close my eyes, many times, because I'm so shallow. If I'm praying and if I see one person get up or play with his phone, like my mind is gonna go to him. So I'm not mature enough to say, okay, he's just a Muslim, he's just sitting here, he's worshiping his Lord, let me focus on my worship. It's very straightforward,
Right.
but my mind will go to, oh, what is he doing? So I can't focus. So closing the eyes is for that reason. But then the first question was amazing. You said, is that a good level to achieve where you're so engrossed?
Because you are disabling your, like, let's say, your alarm
Abilities.
system, or
Yes.
your senses.
Yeah, so I think to reach the highest level of that, where you're almost not in this world, but you're basically barely here, that would be wanted. But once you step into the world where you're not there anymore, that would not be wanted.
Okay.
But basically on the verge of engrossment. And a good example of that would be Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He was leading the salat, and a baby was crying. So the hadith mentions, he sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, I wanted to prolong the salat, but I heard the child crying, and the mother would be disturbed by the crying, and she'll feel uncomfortable because the baby's crying, so she'll feel stressed. So I shortened my salat, or my qira'at, I shortened it so we can finish in time so she can go back to the baby, because he wasn't disabled by his worship. So that would be the highest level, where you're very focused on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but you can still take care of the humans around you. So that was an amazing question. So yes, a very high level of concentration, but barely but within the border of existence on this earth, where you can take care of other people. So if somebody is in a trouble, in an emergency, you can still snap out of it. In English it says snap out, meaning like come out of that thoughts. So you should be able to snap out of it and help somebody. And sometimes we have the complete opposite. People that are not focused, but they still pretend they're so focused. So if somebody's needed, like emergency help, they won't break their salat. They just keep praying. And they just keep praying. And then there's serious emergencies, but they're like, oh, I couldn't break my salat. Yes, you can. If it's an emergency, you're allowed to break your salat. So sometimes we have the extreme opposite, where people, they might be even looking at the person who has an emergency, but they won't help them. So you're saying, like, why are you praying like that? Your mind is over here, but you're pretending you're focused, but the person has an emergency. At least 1-2 people can break the salat and help it. Like imagine if somebody had a heart attack or something like that. So if they need help, then you might need to help them. So the author here, he explains a beautiful poetry by a very famous saint, Junaid. I think his town was Baghdad.
Okay.
So he's known very famously as Junaid Baghdadi. A very, very early saint, very early days. So he mentions a nice poetry speaking about this, and he says, Wujudi in aghiba anil wujud. He goes, my existence, when I become absent from the existences around me, bima yabdu alayya min ash-shuhud, that is what starts off my witnessing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and his amazing worship. So it's basically either we're engrossed within ourselves or we're completely engrossed within the person. So that's why if you look at a father or a mother taking care of a child, at that moment, what do? They become one. As soon as a baby makes a little face, the father goes, what's wrong? He wants to come out of his own existence, but he wants to focus on the child 100%. So the child does anything, the father's like, what is it? And he's constantly trying to experience the same world as the child is experiencing. So that means for children we do that.
Yeah.
We focus on them so much. So even if something very important happens, you're like, no, I don't care. Somebody goes, you want to buy a car? You're like, oh, my baby's crying, bro. Somebody offers you to buy a good deal. You're like, my baby's crying, just wait. I need to focus on my child. So We do that with children, but now we need to do that for adults who are dependent on us. So if we have parents, needy or in need siblings, a poor sister, a poor brother, a poor neighbor, anything of that nature, our spouses, any other Muslim that needs help. So all those kind of situations, I guess there'll be empathy. I don't want to go too deep into that because that'll be different than our lesson. Our lesson is more about letting go of your own ego and stepping into the deeper part of worship. The next lesson is very, very amazing. I just want to do it extremely, I read it really well today, but I want to do an extra presentation next week and even draw it on a board. Because it talks about the self, but then it differentiates it from the soul. So he says soul is basically what he does is he explains it as the more advanced we become, the name changes for who you are. So initially you're just a nafs, like an ego, self. But if you become pious, then you become a ruh. Things like that. And then he has 4 stages. So inshallah we'll go through that next week. I was so excited to see that because that's something I've been thinking about because it comes up in Islamic literature a lot, these words. Ruh, nafs. There's another word called nasama. So there's too many words like that when they're trying to explain the inner dimensions. Like what stage a person is at and how they're feeling and so on. So it's a very amazing lesson, but the author made it so simple the way he explained it. So I was amazed when I saw it. I was like, oh no, he just did that. Like in 5-6 lines, he explains everything so easily. Otherwise, sometimes they have books on just this topic of what is a self and what is the ego and what is the soul. And then there's 2 other words too. So inshallah we'll really enjoy that next week. Inshallah. The servant must know that Allah's knowledge has preceded the existence of all that exists in His creation. So this is a really beautiful way of explaining destiny. Otherwise, destiny becomes a really complicated lesson because we start getting confused between are we choice or do we not have choice in life? Are we determined or determinists in the sense that we feel like everything is already decided, everything is being forced on me? If somebody does a sin, he's like, oh, Allah wanted me to do that because it was in my book of deeds. So I did the sin because it was in my book of deeds. So it really confuses people's iman and it really damages person's iman. So this is a beautiful way of explaining it. We simply call it Allah's knowledge, not Allah's force.
Right.
So once you differentiate that, like our carpet here is colored, is blue and green. So if somebody's walking and then you can tell like, okay, I think next step he'll step on the blue carpet. And then he keeps walking, you're like, oh yeah, the next step will be on the green carpet. And then the next step is on the blue carpet. So are you forcing him to do that or you know what he's gonna do? You just know what he's doing.
Yeah.
So that's called knowledge, that's not called a force.
Because you saw his pattern.
Exactly. In the case of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He actually knows. He doesn't even see the pattern. He knows what's going to happen. But He's not forcing it.
Right.
So,
One thing I believe that unlike us, Allah doesn't exist in a time domain.
yes.
So He can see the future.
Yes.
So that's probably happened with the Nabi Karim Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam during Miraj. So he was able to see people who are in Jannat or Jahannam, right?
Subhanallah.
Allah might have opened that thing for him from that time.
Time and dimensions.
Yeah.
Time and
I'm just
dimensions.
Yeah.
Yeah, highly possible.
Yeah.
Highly, highly possible. So he decreed that which exists by his will in the most perfect manner, one that is rendered inevitable. So meaning whatever he knows will definitely happen. None can overturn it, overrule it, or remove it, or change it, or affect it in any way. When we read destiny like this, it shouldn't scare us. The point is actually the opposite. It should give us extreme peace in life. Extreme levels of peace. Where you see a train coming at you, at least move out of the way, but don't panic. Because if your life is written, you cannot die. And if your death is written, you can't escape it. So either you're going to be in the plus or in the minus, but you can't really overachieve or underachieve. Just keep steady pace and keep moving. So whatever is meant to happen will happen. We can't change it. And a better explanation that's in the Quran is it talks about emotions and destiny. This is where it gets really healthy for our mental health. The Quran says, talks about destiny, then it mentions, so that you don't become stressed over what you lose in life. So you don't get stressed over what you lose in life. And then in good situations, so you don't get too excited when you win in life. So if you are flying high and everything is falling into place, it shouldn't change the way you walk. You're still walking the same way.
Right.
You're just humble.
Yeah.
And if somebody tells you, how are you staying humble? Be like, what changed? Nothing changed. That was meant to happen. And then same thing when a loss happens. You're like, well, it was meant to happen. I can't do nothing about it. So the example that I gave initially about safety and so on, we can kind of squeeze that into there, but in general, it's about emotions. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants us to be extremely emotionally stable. Although bad times will come, they will test us. And to be shaken is not a bad thing. Remember that also. To be shaken is not a bad thing. There's an ayat in the Quran that mentions, وَزُلْزِلُوا زِلْزَالًا شَدِيدًا, and the Sahaba were shaken completely. And zilzal normally means like an earthquake. So they were shaken like an earthquake in their tough times. But they stuck to their core values. So being shaken is not the problem, but there also has to be extreme peace and a calmness inside. That's what the Sahaba mentioned. When they saw the extreme troubles coming towards them, they said, well, Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam told us tough times will come. Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam told us tough times will come when you become a believer. So we knew this was going to happen. It's fine. So they're shaking, but they're also stable like mountains. So it's really hard to, but one person explained it really nicely in a very simplistic manner. They say, imagine when you're standing in a bus stop with glass all around you. There could be snow and rain or whatever, but for some reason the person inside is really calm. It doesn't mean it's not windy. It doesn't mean it's not raining or snowing heavily. It is, everything is happening, but the person is able to stay calm because he's protected in a piece of glass.
Mm-hmm.
So he goes, you should have that kind of composure in life, where bad things can happen, but for some reason you feel really composed.
Okay. That's a good analogy.
Yeah, it's really simple, but it's so powerful.
Yeah.
Because it's a visual, it's a daily experience for us. We see
Right.
these things.
Right.
So it could be snowing, it's raining, but the person is standing calmly in the bus stop. Like, yep, I'm fine. Because he's protected. So destiny sort of does that. It tells you don't stress and don't get too arrogant. Take it easy. So Indeed, the command of Allah is absolute and divine decree. This is why when you listen to saints, they're just so calm. When you listen to, like, when you read the books of the older saints, or if you see a saint, they're just calm, and the world could be turning upside down, but they just have this extreme calmness about them. And a beautiful example of this, which we can take from the seerah of Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, when the battles were very harsh and tough, and even the Sahaba were shaken to their core because the opposition was too much. They had too much weapons. Sahaba always had less weapons, less power, less people. So they were always being shaken to their core. So if any time when things were really going bad, the Nabi would just stay more stronger than you, like even before. And he'll start walking straight into the army, into the opposite army. And he just won't stop. And he'll say, I'm the Prophet. It was never a lie. And I'm the son of Abdul Muttalib, which is his grandfather's name. So he goes, and that's my father, and I'm not scared. And I was a prophet, and it was never a lie. Meaning, like, stay calm. I'm here. Don't panic. I'm here. Like, what it means is, what I experience is not a lie.
Mm-hmm.
What I experience is not a shaitanic whisper. Many times when you study psychologists, they confuse demonic and devilish experiences with prophetic experiences. They say, how do we know the difference if whatever the prophets go through is not a devil overcoming them? And whatever Jibreel alayhi salam, the angel, how is that not a devil? It could be a devil because the exact same thing happens. Somebody comes to you and talks to you, and then you start saying stuff. So you would say the difference is when the prophet talks, he talks extreme wisdom. Wisdom that cannot be changed by the passing of time. Such wisdom. And when somebody's possessed by the devil, when he talks, you scratch your head like, what the heck is wrong with this guy? And he says very bewildered, like scared things.
Right.
But when a prophet talks, even when it's hard times, he's just so calm. And only beauty comes out of his actions and his words. So just because there's some similarity, as in they're experiencing too many things, that doesn't mean they're both the same. Let's just say somebody's having complete mental problems, another person is a professor going through extreme research. So he's like, oh my God, this happens. Oh my God, in chemistry this happens, or in my psychology study I found out this, I found out that. So his brain going crazy too. And that person in the mental asylum, he's also having extreme experiences. So what's the difference? Well, one is well thought out and one is insanity. Why are we saying it's the same thing? It's not the same thing. So Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam is saying, my experiences are not fake, I am a prophet. My experiences are not fake, I am a prophet. If Allah is with me, then it doesn't matter who's in front of me. You understand, the army is bigger.
Right.
But he's like, I don't care, I'm a prophet. Prophets don't get scared. They stay very composed. They can have human fears, but on an inner level, they know what's happening. They're not lost. They know what they're doing. So if you and I pray salat and we feel something, respect that feeling. It's not insanity, it's extreme spirituality. Don't doubt yourself. Continue with the wisdom and it'll get bigger and bigger, and that's why the next lesson in this book is about Noor. And the very next lesson, and he mentions Noor is like your transportation. It carries you through high levels of understanding.
Right.
Noor is like a car, you just sit on it, it comes over you, and then you feel this amazing ride. It could be a 20-minute, it could be a 2-hour, 4-hour deep good thoughts. And if we get lucky, maybe it could be for longer, inshallah. Forever, inshallah. But that's the point, like Noor can carry us from stage to stage, and things become more easier. Because the more a person stays calm and doesn't sin, and listens and waits for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the more he's carried more lightly. And the journey becomes more powerful, more powerful, more powerful. And that's why they say, when Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam went through the hardest time in his life, which was when his wife died and his uncle died. that's when he went on Mi'raj, on his spiritual journey.
Right. Cool.
So they say when the darkness is the most, that's when the most light comes.
Okay.
At the same time.
Okay.
So the more the pain, the human suffering,
All the reward.
the more the spiritual highs. So somebody could be crying, but he's on a completely very high level. Like we don't know what he's going through. That's why the Quran mentions, Inna Allaha ma'as sabirin. Allah is with them, meaning that it's very, very powerful experience. Because once a person suffers, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants to tell the person that you are suffering, but try to understand it's because of me. And there's one ayat that mentions your sabr is for nobody but me. That's such a powerful ayat. That we might think I'm doing good deeds, hopefully for a halal income. I'm having so much problems. I keep going to hard work, and I'm trying to feed my family. But why are you feeding your family halal food? Why can't you feed them haram food? It's because of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because you respect the Lord. So who's your sabr for? Your kids or Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? It's a higher level, higher purpose. Otherwise any one of us can go get tons of haram money. So your sabr is for nobody but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We might do sabr for our family, our kids, our parents who are suffering, and we go through a lot. But where's our sabr going? It's going in our book of deeds, and it's only for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And once that happens, a person feels an extreme calmness even in the hardest time in his life. Because the ma'iyya means unionship, like Allah is with the person. Inna Allaha ma'as sabirin. So that ma'a, it means like unionship. A person feels very close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So sometimes the journey that a person the amount of distance he covers on a bad day is much more than how much distance he can cover on a good day. So may Allah give us tawfiq. Subhana rabbika rabbil izzati amma yasifun wa salamun ala al-mursalin walhamdulillahi rabbil alamin. Sallallahu ala nabiyyina. Yeah, please pause it. I'll turn it off. Yeah.